Well, thanks a lot, Sarah, first of all, for organizing this fantastic day. I think I've had really great discussions, really interesting, complementary perspectives we've been talking about. And I'm a bit daunted, I have to say, coming after our three distinguished speakers here, as a junior academic that I am, to sort of finish up our lineup today. Also, since I know I'm the only thing standing between you and that nice glass of wine. Just bear with me for a little bit longer and we'll get this over with. So I'm going to talk about the refugee crisis, as we heard, and more accurately perhaps we call the border crisis in Europe today, the crisis of our border and migration politics. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Microphone goes on. And as you know, as we know, this topic has hardly left the front pages of our newspapers in the last few months, really. We keep on hearing new reports of dramas, tragedies, fatalities at the borders of Europe. We keep also in academia seeing more and more interest in this. In the UK, for instance, urgency grants being announced to work on migration, on refugees from research funding bodies. There are more and more events on official level, think tanks, universities, policymakers getting together to work out new solutions to the refugee crisis, and those solutions by and large tend to mean more of the same old medicine, which is more border security, more collaboration, as is now the case with Turkey in policing, patrolling the borders. So this then is a conflicted, often repressive and downright depressing in many ways topic that I'll talk about today, following on from our dystopia from Facebook here with another jolly piece of research. So I'll build here on my long-running fieldwork research as an anthropologist on irregular migration between principally West Africa and southern Spain. I just put an image up here of a bit of that slice of the Euro-African border, if you will. This is a triple 6-meter-tall fence, part funded by the EU, surrounding this tiny Spanish enclave of Melilla in North Africa, a bit of the EU on African soil, with a fence built, erected to keep undocumented migrants out of the Union, which hasn't really worked out. So that's why, in this image from a couple of years back, Spain was adding razor wire onto these fences to keep mainly sub-Saharan African undocumented migrants out of the Union. So I focus here on how I, as an ethnographer, and how we as ethnographers in that broader sense, whether anthropological or sociological, it doesn't really matter that much, I think, may position ourselves in this highly politicized field of the so-called fight against illegal migration, the quest to secure Europe's borders that we hear so much about in the media. So I give a pretty subjective account of the specificities of this particular field as a researcher, and trying to show you how this subjectivity itself, this reflexivity, is to some extent a key part of what I think ethnography can contribute to the debates on Europe's borders today. So as a quite recent PhD, a junior academic, and so on and so forth, I thought I'd give this paper a bit of a sort of journey of discovery, the way I came to this topic, the way I encountered the risk of mixing metaphors, various knots on my path, entanglements, barriers, if you will. And these three knots that I'll talk about are, first of all, the field entanglement itself, as my initial informants in fieldwork resisted participation in my research project on irregular migration. The second entanglement is a disciplinary tangle around this field of border security, irregular migration, and ethnography's role in it. And the third one would be the almost Gordian knot of the solution to this border crisis itself, and our potential impact, if you will, in that field, to use that current buzzword, at least in UK academia. So first of all, the field knots. Take you back a few years to a previous border crisis in Europe. It's often been a fair bit of amnesia in our current debate on this topic. It's unprecedented nature, yes, in terms of numbers of Syrians arriving in southern Europe today. It is unprecedented, but in fact, we've had border crisis after border crisis at the external borders of the European Union now for over a decade. And this is where my own research started. After this event, depicted in this photograph, of what came to be known as a boat crisis in the Spanish Canary Islands off West African coasts in 2006, when more than 30,000 willing West African workers, you see some of them here, crammed into wooden fishing boats and set off on a journey of up to 1,500 kilometers across the open Atlantic, trying to reach the beaches of Gran Canaria and Tenerife, major tourist destinations. And you see one of those tourists gawping at these arrivals up there, his inflatable mattress, in this picture that made the rounds of the world's media at the time. So this is really when my own fieldwork kicks off, and I'll talk a little bit about that now, and how I initially often came to feel a bit like that tourist on his mattress, gazing and gawping at these abject others arriving into southern Europe. So I started my fieldwork after this crisis in 2010. I had set off for my PhD at London School of Economics to study these irregular migration routes, and I thought I want to go obviously beyond this type of mass-mediated imagery, this migration spectacle, as is sometimes been referred to in the literature, and so develop a radically phenomenological approach, sort of following individual migrants on their journeys through the borderlands and see how they encounter these various obstacles on their path, border controls, trying to sneak across a border late at night, skirting African border police, and trying to embark in one of these boats without being detected, and so on and so forth. So seeing this sort of from the inside, from an embodied perspective, what does it mean really to become, in the eyes of border officers, illegal? So I thought, arriving into West Africa, into Senegal's capital Dakar, in early 2010, I thought a good first port of call were some of these guys, some of these former migrants deported back, sent back into their local communities by Spain after 2006. They had set up associations of deportees in their home communities with leaders and so on and so forth. I could approach them and as a sort of initial step on my fieldwork journey. I was in for a bit of a surprise. I started meeting some of these leaders, and it quickly became clear they were quite unwilling or resentful at the interest that researchers such as myself were giving to their journey. So I followed one such leader of an association of deportees, or repatriates, who I call in my book Mohamedou, would tell me as he led me into the sandy lanes of his fishing community on the edge of Dakar, so what can you give us? What can you offer us? And what do you want? So he asked the questions in that order, which was kind of the wrong way around. But also for a reason, he had seen way too many visitors already. So he sat down in his courtyard, he got a notebook out and started flipping through the pages, showing me the names and numbers and contact details of all the people who had come to visit his association since they had been sent back from Spain. There were NGO workers, there were researchers, research students such as myself, there were journalists, probably undercover police, politicians, and even an EU delegate all the way from Brussels had come down to meet with these repatriates. And he had never heard back from any of them, he said. They come here and eat from us, was the way he put it, using the local idiom of making money from you. There's lots of money in illegal migration, was how he put it. He was clearly resentful at the fact that there was this stampede coming in, and I was simply one more latecomer in this cavalcade of visitors coming in to his neighborhood to eat, in a way, from his misery. Relegated to them, the role they can use is that of the slightly threatening other, going from that victim role of encamped existence and coming into town, protesting, and evoking suddenly a very different set of stereotypes, a very different set of racialized imageries. And one key conclusion in terms of productivity of this border control effort was the counterproductive nature of what was going on at the borders, because, as I saw it, Europe's efforts to fight this kind of illegal migration only generated more extreme versions of it. As I said, the closing of one route generated a new route where people would embark with new types of methods, taking larger risks than before, using smugglers whose networks were strengthened at the same time, and you came to see more and more tension building up, more and more drama building at the borders, and I think we see the consequences of that today in Greece and Italy, for instance. So that this industry, as I saw it, kept producing the very object it was supposed to control or curtail. Again, many of my informants, they were themselves very well aware of these dynamics, this sort of vicious cycle that was at the same time very productive, was at the same time very beneficial to many groups. Mohammed, my friend, complained about the border guards not doing their work, as he put it. If you just give them bribes, they will let you pass, it doesn't really matter. They're just there to make money off our backs. Even the collaborating African police raised similar issues. This is one patrol I joined with Senegalese border police along Senegalese coast, trying to patrol the countrymen from leaving their own country in the first place. And you see this Spanish-funded quarter bike patrolling the beaches, put your good use here with this little girl crawling up on top of it, and the border police still sitting around, not doing very much. But still complaining that they need more resources, they need new vehicles, they need more people for the vehicles, they need extra pay, already getting extra pay from Spain, but they need more of that. They need a new iPhone perhaps, they got one, but they need another one, and so on and so forth. The complaints kept coming, the demands kept coming, a gift economy had been created, which just kept reinforcing itself. And everyone knew it wasn't quite working out the way it was planned. I think in North Africa, in Europe's neighboring countries, we see this dynamic even more clearly. And I see I'm behind time, so I'm going to rush a bit here. Even in European capitals, European border police headquarters I visited, I heard slightly more cautiously framed critiques, but still critiques of what was going on, what politicians had tasked the border officers with doing. I'm not going to read this out to you, but you might get the gist of it, that basically our measures are not really doing the job they're supposed to. These satellites are kind of useless. This fence is a bit pointless, but we're still doing it. We're still getting money for it. We're going to keep on. We're going to keep on producing this sort of measure, this sort of technology, but we are not all that convinced ourselves of it. Ethically speaking, necessarily the migrants who I met are all in agreement with this type of approach. There's certainly a lot of ambivalence around this project, around being an actor in a sense, as a researcher in this type of industry at the borders of Europe. And that point. Thank you.
Bordering practices here, and you mentioned in passing the health borders, and you know, to remember that an awful lot of borders before people cared about nation sort of things like that were about delousing and health issues, disease, that built on top of those borders were later state borders, and so we've now got the financial borders, the internet borders, the migration borders, the borders of disease, the borders of war and conflict are all very, very different entities. It's really, you've brought that home to me. I have to admit that when I first saw that image, I didn't notice the guys at the top. Yeah. It took the second visitation to that photograph for me to see those guys. That's really interesting. Anyway, so I'm going to pass on to our last individual discussant, Marie-Andrée Jacob. Discussant for Ruben Andersson, before we pass on to our overview discussant afterwards. Marie-Andrée is a professor of law at Keele, so standing in as an anthropologist again. It's the end of the index, it's the other. And she's got a very interdisciplinary work. You can read the record of her work there, and has been particularly interested in illegality for a reason I asked her to comment. Over to you.
Thank you. Thank you for the wonderful paper, great companion to the book, which is a devastating portrayal of migrant illegality. So I'd like to spend a few minutes on the three knots of Ruben, and then to say a few words on my own knot, my own side of entanglement with the thing on which I depend, which is legality. So the first knot is the resistance of the participants to be studied in the way that Ruben wanted to study them initially. So he starts with kind of figure ground reverse, where he reshifts the debate from the migrants to the machinery that processes them, and aims to unravel the inner logic of this. So we could say that his project is located in the body of work that followed the exaltation of law and order to study up and unwind the power that crafts categories and here, which are the legal and the illegal. So the idea is field work within elites that hold power, not only amongst those who are at the receiving end of it. So Ruben mentions that he decided to do a study, not to do a study of the industry's local workings in a specific setting, because it would have been an exploration of the industry's refraction through a particular location, rather than an investigation of the industry itself. I wonder what is meant here by the industry itself. The industry is not whole, it's not uniform. It shouldn't be made more powerful than it is already. It is full of cracks, inconsistencies, and of absurdity, as you mentioned it yourself in the book. So it's always already refracted. It's bent, it's plastic, as it's an aggregate of interventions whose meaning itself occurs through the repetition of refractions. Could it be that what Ruben means is that the problem is not with the industry's application on the ground, but with its technocratic expert nodal conditions? The industry always exists in a particular setting, whether it's a conference boardroom, a policy circle, academic conference in which it is uttered, extended, and even sometimes reflected upon. When social scientists speak of studying the everyday life of, for instance, the law, of how real people experience the law, there's sometimes a temptation to leave aside the fact that decision makers are real too. They are enmeshed in the particular messy conditions of sociality too. When studying up ethnographers, including Andersson and myself, we encounter new artifacts, financial instruments, an institution, legal theories, biotechnologies, corporate social responsibility, ventures, open software, and also new agents, like you mentioned, whether they're human rights activists, human resources personnel, bankers, arbitrators, and other academics. So it turns, in turn, the issue of collaboration, but also of complicity with one's participants has itself elicited ethnographic attention. Here, Ruben's effort to take seriously, that's the term, to take seriously the terms, the frames of mind of the border professionals. So this means using their terms with analytical, responsive compassion, and it's really sine qua non to really understand other ways of knowing. And here we have, because of your compassion, because of the care in the work, it's the stitching, the knitting of the tapestry of the industry. And this can be done only with compassion and creativity, and thus with a specific ethics. So here we have ethnography that is not an epistemological contribution, just shifting the terms of the debate, bringing fresh perspective, but the fact that it is an intense, intrinsically collaborative endeavor and a mode of response means that it is in itself an ethical commitment, which is not understood as such by a research ethics committee. And I'll return to this ethical commitment later. The second series of knots for Ruben are the entanglements of discipline, what it means to work within a specific discipline or with a disciplined combination of several of them. At the roundtable on ethnography, law, and society in Seattle last May, different ethnographers, Sally Engel, Mary, Annalise Rice, and Justin Richland, spoke of ethnographic sensibilities from different disciplinary traditions and how now ethnography is crossing discipline. Crossing borders, apart from the etymology play on word here, I think is a serious matter. And I was a bit sad to read that initially, when you remember being a PhD student, that you were initially worrying about making those crossings, as if they were indeed guarded borders. But I'm so glad that you broke loose. I myself feel like a squatter, a migrant in disciplinary circle, when I explain how I dig, appropriate, mobilize materials from, how I am deeply shaped by, without necessarily coming from or belonging to. Of course, doing interdisciplinary informed work means taking time. So here there's the temporality demanded by interdisciplinary work, which is relating truly to how others think, but this temporality has been evacuated in agenda for work that at once has to be fast and impactful and original and innovative. So I just hinted here that there's a third agenda that is disrupted here, that of originality, innovation, and uniqueness. As an ethnographer, Ruben is very conscious that this work is not entirely his. An intrinsically collaborative project means that participants do not provide data on which we apply analysis, but participants give ethnographic cues, artifacts, often with analysis built in, like Mohammed for you. This compels us to return to ethnography as an ethical commitment, in the sense that Annelise Rice talks about it. About ethnography as a commitment to relations set in motion, an experiment with collaborative form, rather than to the accumulation of knowledge or the incremental description of the other in the form of text, textual output, or deliverable.